Coming up, the New York Football Giants offseason rolls on, and reports around the NFL suggest Daniel Jones is the absolute worst. We break down the perception of the man under center for Big Blue and whether or not the narrative has gone fully off the rails. All coming up next. Yes, my friends, it is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts over here, Adam Arbrecht, over there, Andrew Makowitz. We're healthy, we're wealthy, we're wise, and yes, we're talking New York Football Giants. Rookies are in the building, though they're not going to do anything physical, Andy. And that's why we'll be discussing one Daniel Jones and where the power rankings stand by some of the NFL pundits out there.
You go into kind of the bottom 10-ish or 11-ish, and then you start getting into Will Levis at 22, Caleb Williams 23,
Good.
Anthony Richardson after like 3 games at 24.
But looked really good in those 3 games.
Yeah, he looked good when he wasn't completing 59.5% of his passes. JJ McCarthy at 25, Derek Carr 26, Jacoby Brissett, one of your all-time like bridge quarterbacks at 27, Jaden Daniels 28. Gardner Minshew, another one of Adam's big-time favorites at 29.
That's right.
Future Hall of Famer Bo Nix at 30, and generational talent Bryce Young at 31. And then, the last ranked starting quarterback in the entire NFL is one Daniel Jones. So I kind of wanted to illustrate all the 10 or 11 players that are in front of Daniel Jones, because to be the worst, there has to be people in front of you that may or may not have the accolades or the talent to be there. What's your initial reaction to Daniel Jones being 32? Do you think it's just an absolute slight? Do you think, well, hey, like his play has dictated that this is where he belongs? Like, what's your take on this?
My belief is it doesn't matter. Go through the list of all these teams, and we'll get our beautiful faces up here. Go through these players. You said Will Levis, Caleb Williams, a rookie, Anthony Richardson, not a lot of playing time, McCarthy, a rookie, Derek Carr, veteran, obviously, whatever degree, Brissett and Minshew, as you mentioned, 2 kind of journeyman backup-ish, sometimes spot starters, another rookie in Daniels, another rookie in Nix, second-year player Bryce Young, very disappointing rookie year, and then Daniel Jones. If you are not one of those top 10 to 12-ish kind of guys, and if you are a team and you are a fan base that does not have one of those top 12-ish kind of guys, it really doesn't matter. Daniel Jones 32nd, Daniel Jones 24th. It wouldn't make a difference about the perception of what we think this team can do, what we think he's capable of. So at the end of the day, the fact that if you said, well, what's the highest you would possibly put Daniel Jones? 20th? 21st? Okay. Does that change? Does that make any difference at all? No. So maybe it's disrespectful to Daniel Jones. You'll give the defense for that here coming up in a moment. But in the end, it just means you don't have the franchise guy. So, rank your top 20 and maybe leave the rest of them for another conversation. Andy, however, does not agree with this. He believes it's insulting. It's disgusting. It's disrespectful. And it won't stand. And coming up here in a moment, he'll explain why. Before Andy does that, though, we're going to let you know that his big explanation about Daniel Jones is brought to you by Personam, which is an AI-driven cyber threat detection engine. Personam improves your vision into your network security environment and allows you to see cyber threats that other tools and platforms simply cannot do. Personam is always vigilant, always learning. Andy, what are we learning about Daniel Jones and why he is so much better than that 32nd rank?
Well, listen, I tend to agree with you that, like, whether you're ranked by a CBS Sports reporter as the 27th or the 32nd, it's not good either way. And it's the replacement level where your team is probably looking for a different alternative at quarterback.
Right.
The thing that drives me nuts about this list is just the amount of how everyone feels like it's just okay to pile on to Daniel Jones because that's like the thing that everyone else is doing. And so, like, no one's going to be outraged at how disrespectful it would be to put a playoff winning quarterback as the worst quarterback in the entire starting NFL. But so, like, it just seems like an easy shot. Like, if we're going to put someone down, that's an easy one. Here's what I think.
Okay.
If you look at this list, you mentioned Kyler Murray at 21. Let's start with Kyler Murray at 21 and go all the way back. We mentioned Will Levis, Caleb Williams, Derek Carr, Jacoby Brissett, etc. All are there. There are 11 quarterbacks that are in front of Daniel Jones, starting with Kyler Murray at 21. Do you know that Daniel Jones has more playoff wins than all 11 of those quarterbacks combined? Like, like if you think about it, Kyler Murray, you said because of his athleticism and his raw talent, maybe you could move him up. Kyler Murray has not actually accomplished that much in this league. Now, I'm not saying that people would immediately take Daniel Jones over Kyler Murray, but the fact that he's getting such accolades and flowers when he's only thrown for 26 touchdowns is his career high. Daniel Jones is 24. Kyler Murray in his one playoff game looked like the worst quarterback on the planet, and the team couldn't even score points.
Kyler Murray. Okay, but Kyler Murray, regular season head-to-head 2-0 against Daniel Jones, just in case you're wondering. But Kyler Murray's played 65 games to 60, so they're right on par with one another. Kyler Murray has a 28-36-1 record, and you wouldn't say that the Arizona Cardinals have been an incredible team over the life cycle of his career. Big injury season obviously mixed in. Daniel Jones is 22-36-1. Kyler Murray's completed over 66% of his passes. He wins that category. He's averaged 7 yards per pass attempt. He wins that category. 240 yards. We talked about yardage being a big metric this past episode. 240 yards for Kyler Murray. Big number there. Interceptions. Yeah, he has 46 to Daniel Jones 40, so he turns it over. He's played 5 more games. Everything else, though, QB rating, right? The rushing yards, the rushing yard attempts per carry are also the same at 5.8. Rushing touchdowns, 26. And by the way, 2 Pro Bowls. So, we talk about not winning a playoff game, but there's other metrics that we go by here and talk about some of these players. So again, the deeper you get into the analytical weeds on it, I think the stronger case you make that other quarterbacks are deserving. Quarterbacks that have played are deserving of being ahead of Daniel Jones on this list.
Derek Carr sitting at 26. Derek Carr is in his mid-30s and has never won a playoff game in his entire life. He was on the Las Vegas Raiders, and they were like, we need to get better because he's just not good enough. He goes over the Saints. They can't even, scratch the playoffs. They lose to Baker Mayfield. How does he continually get all of this praise to say, he's still a good quarterback in this league when he hasn't had any team success and ever led his team to the playoffs? And he's a decade older than some of the other guys on the list. To me, it makes no sense that we just seem to forget that at the height of heights, Daniel Jones has won a playoff game, was the best player on the field. How does that not account for anything at all?
Derek Carr has never been kind of what Kirk Cousins had been, right? Can lead your team, really good regular season stats, can win playoff games, can't go deep in playoffs. I think he's a notch below him. But also, as you mentioned, should Derek Carr be behind J.J. McCarthy? Even Anthony Richardson? Probably not. Some people would argue if you haven't thrown an NFL pass yet, you can't be above any other starting quarterback in the league. The second that you throw that first pass, you have that first win, whatever the benchmark is, then you start to vault ahead of these other players. And I think that there's probably some validity to that. Although, if you said just on spec, would you rather have Daniel Jones right now or one of these rookies? Obviously, you want the guys with the upside, with the potential, with the unknown ceiling. I don't know if it's that. There's 2 things. One, I think because this past season where Daniel Jones got injured, to be fair, but also this past season where he looked like he had regressed. It looked like his read progressions were just absolutely below average relative to the year prior. And then the team doesn't have success either. Now, some might say, well, that's because he didn't have Daniel Jones. If they'd had Daniel Jones, they would have gone back to the playoffs. We don't think that's the case. But I think there's something there about everyone is willing to look at Daniel Jones and say that playoff win against that Vikings team that was perceived to be the softest playoff team maybe in the entire playoffs that year, that was kind of a lot of smoke and mirrors. And we're not going to overcredit Daniel Jones for having a playoff win on his record when maybe it doesn't feel as substantial as others. Now, to your point, other quarterbacks have gone to the playoffs and not looked good. Kyler Murray is a good example. It just feels like everyone is either piling on with Daniel Jones because they feel like they want to be ahead of the curve on it, or that Daniel Jones, much like the Giants, don't feel like a good team and doesn't feel like a good quarterback. And so you're kind of just I don't know. Why would where would I put him?
Well, it's funny. Bo Nix, Giants had an opportunity to draft him. Yeah. They decided not to draft him. He's already ranked ahead of where Daniel Jones is. Giants could have drafted J.J. McCarthy.
Well, that's the other. Hold on.
7 spots ahead of Daniel Jones, right?
That's how we know the Giants made a massive mistake, right? They chose to stick with Daniel Jones. That's what I mean.
The fact that J.J. McCarthy instantly is better than Derek Carr and Daniel Jones and Jacoby Brissett, who are veterans that have won games in this league, Like, that to me is wild. But the Giants could have signed Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew, or they could have drafted JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix. They could have moved themselves up outside of, having Daniel Jones as the 32nd. They didn't do that. This list, it just feels like everybody's piling on. You can't diminish a guy that wins a playoff game. Look at Baker Mayfield. He's at 20. He's been able to win playoff games. Like, you got to give these guys credit where credit's due. It's just, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way.
Where do you think? And let's do this here coming up in a second. I'm going to pose a question to you that I think will crystallize where these rankings should be and whether or not Daniel Jones is really being disrespected. We'll get into that here in just one moment. Okay. In what has been an absolutely off the rails conversation, mostly because of me, let me ask you this question. When we look at this QB ranking board, power ranking board, at the end of the upcoming season, where do you think Daniel Jones will be ranked?
Wow, that's a great question, Adam.
Because, and I'll tell you, I'll give you, since I hit you this out of the blue, Caleb Williams will be deserving of being ahead of Daniel Jones by the end of this year, I believe. I think JJ McCarthy won't be too far off from it playing in Minnesota with that talent pool. Whether or not Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew work out, okay, Jaden Daniels is going to be ahead of him. Bo Nix, maybe he doesn't. Maybe Bryce Young is a total disaster. Everybody else, though, when you go through this list and you get into those mid-tier teams, Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Deshaun Watson, at best, I will tell you right now, two things. One, he might be the only QB on this list that is right now in this moment the most likely to not be the starting quarterback a year from now. And that's for various different reasons, right? Starting quarterbacks could be on other teams, depending on who you are. But more importantly, he has the lowest probably movement chain potentially, I would say, because even if he's 32nd right now, we think that's disrespectful. He should be ranked 22nd right now. Okay. By the end of the year, though, you might say every single rookie quarterback is going to jump him. So, maybe he's deserving. By the end of the year, he'll be 27th. So that's probably the biggest case I can make here, that even though he shouldn't be 32nd coming into the year and no quarterback that's played in the NFL should be behind rookies. Okay. At the end of this year, though, it's far more likely that he's somewhere between 27 and 32 than it is that he's between 18 and 12.
It's been since the Reagan administration that Deshaun Watson has been a good football player. Can we just agree?
Has no deserving value to be where he is on this list. I'll be very clear.
His last time that he had a passer rating that was over 84 was 2020 when he played for the Texans. Then he took a gap year where he went to go find himself because obviously, he needed to study abroad for a little bit. But like, what is he doing at 17 is my question. Like, I can't even fathom what that is. To me, if the Giants play well, and if we do think that the offensive line is improved, and we do think that Malik Neighbors can unlock something, because that has been the discussion point, right? Get him offensive line help. He's never really had any big weapons. If he does that and the Giants end up, let's just say, having a winning record this season, which would be a tall task considering that their over-under right now is 6.5 wins. Why wouldn't Daniel Jones move up to 18th on this list? Now, would that mean that he gets another year of playing for the Giants as the 18th best quarterback? I don't know. I don't think so. He's under contract, but like, you could get off of his contract. It's not cost prohibitive. But I would not be shocked if you said, okay, Daniel Jones didn't play well, or the injury concerns popped up again and he got hurt and the Giants are going to move on. I would not be shocked. And I would also not be shocked if you said he ends up the year better than Russell Wilson, who doesn't have any gas in the tank left. They're moving on from Geno Smith. Deshaun Watson doesn't look the part. Bryce Young isn't, has 2 years of track records of not being good. Bo Nix struggles early on, and all the question marks about him, continued to pop up. And Derek Carr ends up getting released by the Saints. Like, I could very easily see a world where Daniel Jones is either not the starter or he moves up into that 18 range. But to your point, is 18 good enough for him to still be the quarterback of the Giants? Like, he would have to do more than what he did in the playoff winning year, I think, to keep the job at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting conversation. I'll just go ahead and give you this short list here. I think I got one guy out of order because I added him in afterwards. Watson, Wilson, Smith, Levis, Carr, Brissett, Minshew, Nix, and Young. That's 9 players. 9 players that at the end of this year, I could reasonably see Daniel Jones having had a better statistical season, potentially, or just an overall better year. That's 9 guys. So again, you're 32nd right now. That's going to get you down to 23. 20 to 23 would be like kind of my expectation. And again, power rankings is the other part of it, man. Okay, what are you taking into account? Are we talking about their contracts? Well, that's why Daniel Jones is dead last, because he's making $40 million and he's nowhere near worth that. And all these rookie numbers, right? So who would you buy right now? Okay, well, Aaron Rodgers is 63 years old. I'm not going to take him 11th overall. I'm going to take him somewhere back towards 20, not because he's not still potentially one of the best, but he's coming off an injury, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different factors in that regard. But that would be my list of like very easily players that you could look at and say, hey, these are guys that he could be a better player than. So that's totally fine. But again, 20 to 23. And when you ask that question, well, what does he have to do? He has to have a better season than the playoff year that he had. Whether or not to be the Giants quarterback next year or not, but just to justify that he is a quarterback deserving of being ranked top 20 consistently, I think it just comes down to game and statisticals, stats. It just comes down to like, what is his QBR? What's his turnover to touchdown ratio? What's his completion percentage? And is he the guy, is he a guy that, I'm not going to use the force multiplier term that Andy loves, but is he a guy that's mitigating mistakes? Is he kind of a slightly above game manager? That's what he needs to accomplish, because I don't know if this team is ready to be a playoff team again. Maybe they're ready to make the playoffs and lose in the first round in the wild card. That, to me, if this team went to the playoffs as a wild card team, but faced a really good team, maybe not that version of the Vikings that had no defense, and they lost, that can still be a very accomplished year for Daniel Jones. He doesn't need to win another playoff game and then take, the likes of Jared Goff down to the wire. No, he just has to be a quarterback that, it's like the eye test, man, week to week. When I see my quarterback take the field, I think, hey, that's our starting quarterback, not, hey, I wonder if he'll kind of struggle a little bit and Drew Lock will get the fourth quarter. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where we're at.
I thought you were going to say it's the difference between that's our starting quarterback to that's our starting quarterback.
It's like all about punctuation, right?
It's just a little key switch of the punctuation can make all of the difference.
Yeah, but so that's my point though, right? And again, let's go back to this list. Like, whatever's going to happen here, Bryce Young, we may think, oh, what a disappointing rookie season for him. And it was. But they're still all in on making him their franchise guy. They took him first overall. Guys like, again, the Gardner Minshew and Brissett piece, I think, is the interesting one. But in reality, 10 years from now, I think we'll be looking back and saying, Daniel Jones is kind of like a Jacoby Brissett or like a Gardner Minshew. Never really considered, do we want to put all of our money behind this guy? He made that one big payday, but he bounced around the league a little bit, was a really solid backup. I tell you what, some team's going to love having him on the right price point, under $10 million, backing up their starting QB and saying, well, he had a little sprained ankle there. He's going to miss one game. Daniel Jones can go and throw the ball, run around a little bit for you. He's going to be one of those guys in the end. So I think he's deserving of being in that type of group. And then when you go and, again, compare the stats to a Gardner Minshew, it's not that far off. And the big difference is probably like Gardner Minshew, completion percentage is lower. He's not a great quarterback, but he's got a little bit like that it factor. Like, you're like, oh my God, this guy can make things happen. Whereas Daniel Jones, you go, oh my God, he's going to make something horrible happen. Like, so I don't know how far off base this is. I feel like, again, this is my own doing. I have derailed this episode in such an aggressive manner. Please get into the comments. Just tell me to calm down, one less cup of coffee in the morning. I understand it. But I just think it's interesting. And it's probably more of it's an overall QB conversation of the NFL rather than just like Daniel Jones. Should he be there? It's just about talking about those names and realizing, like, are you bullish on having anyone that's not a rookie? Let's just put them to the side and automatically. We shouldn't even be talking about them yet. Everybody else, you're like, are you bullish on Derek Carr, on Gardner Minshew, on Jacob? No, of course not. Of course not.
Well, and Adam, that's why I think I have it saying if Daniel Jones has a really good season, if he doesn't have a good season, it's a moot point because he's not going to be the starting quarterback anymore. The Giants are going to move off of him, and it'll be done. If he has a good season, you kind of mentioned that you think he can move up to 23rd. I'm saying that he can move up to 18th, so I'm a little bit higher on him. But still, we're still talking about a back half type of quarterback. I think after his playoff win and right before he got the contract, I kind of had him in the 14-ish range because you kind of thought he could take the next ascension up from that game. And so from here, I don't know, 18th is kind of where I have him now.
I'm a little suspicious here. Might have to go back and check the tape on that one, Andrew. I believe, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong here, but I believe you were willing to sniff Daniel Jones as being a borderline top 10 quarterback coming off that playoff season. Whereas yours truly, I think I went like top 15 and you were like fringe top 10.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If you want to say that I was 12, or saying that is he better than XYZ guy that's around
Yes.
10, sure. But I think there's a different discussion point to say, are you a guy that can win a playoff game and be a top 12 or 13 guy, as opposed to you had a good season and you're 18th
That's a
and
really
like you're
good
still looking for an option.
it's a really good way to frame it, right? Like top 12 statistical, but do you believe that he can like win you a playoff game? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's weird caveats to this where you're like, yeah. I mean, this is kind of the Kirk Cousins thing, right?
Dak
Great
Prescott.
statistical. Yeah, Dak Prescott.
Dak Prescott.
Great statistical regular season quarterback, but does he have that ability to do that thing for you? And that's actually to your point. We'll throw this up one last time. When you talk about Dak Prescott and you're like, well, 8th overall. Well, we talking about regular season stats? Okay. Yeah, he should be a top 10 guy because he crushes it. If we're talking about performing in the playoffs and having talent around him and not being able to succeed, he's one of the biggest, choke quarterbacks in the league potentially. And I don't not like Dak Prescott. I would be happy to have Dak Prescott's regular season consistency for the New York Football Giants. But that's why you question him being up there, right? That's why you look and say, listen, maybe Jared Goff, it's a 1 year really, they really surge forward. Put Jared Goff in the top 10 over Dak Prescott 100%. Why? Because he showed that he can do it. He showed that he can play well in those big moments. And that's beyond just the yardage and the stat category. Same thing for Kirk Cousins. I'll make a case right now that Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins, I would put them over top of Dak Prescott if we're talking about like ability to accomplish. Now, Kirk Cousins, man, he's coming off the injury and he may end up having a total dumpster season. But I think you get the point, right? Like, what is that achievement level here? So maybe that's what it is. Hey, Daniel Jones, you could be 14 to 18, maybe statistically, because you have Malik Neighbors now and you think it's going to be more dynamic. I mean, it seems insane to even suggest that for this Giants offense, which has accomplished nothing in the last decade. But you could be that statistically. It doesn't mean I'm more bullish on what you accomplish if we threw you into a playoff game. So it's interesting. It's interesting how hard the pendulum swings. Because remember, coming off that playoff win, what was it? Well, listen, maybe you should have picked up that 5th-year option. It would have cost you less, but you got to pay him. The perception was like, you have to pay him. Do you have to pay him as much as they did? Probably not. But NFL GMs would say, well, you can't let a playoff winning quarterback walk out the door. Nobody does it. Some teams should. The Giants probably should have, but you can't let that player walk out. Fast forward 1 year, injuries, bad season for the team overall, and Daniel Jones has gone from statistically top 10 to now being a guy you're like, I don't even know if I'd put him 38th.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, at the end of the day, on the quarterback rankings, we'll tie a bow on this piece of it. You mentioned Daniel Jones in the year where, in his contract year, he was top 10 in QBR and won a road playoff game. Now, everyone talks about the Minnesota Vikings not being good defensively. They were 13-4, won their division. Listen,
right.
You win a road playoff game, you're okay by me. It's not like they were facing a 5th-string quarterback. Like, Kirk Cousins was there. He was that guy that you just mentioned that is a bona fide top 12 to 14 type of quarterback. He did that on the road. So, like, it is crazy how much the narrative has changed from that playoff game and that playoff win to where we sit today. Crazy how much things can change in an 18-month span.
So I want to do one thing here before we get out the door, because I think it's constructive, right? So if we go back and we say, I mentioned that 2022 regular season, right? And that's where Daniel Jones had the QBR of 62.9. I'm doing this on the fly for this past regular season. A 62.9 that year still would have kept him top 10. He would have narrowly been top 10, just ahead of Jordan Love this year. So he would have been 9th this past season. And if I remember correctly, go back to 2021 regular season, and you'd be talking about, listen, I a little bit off the mark here for me, like 100%, because he still would have been a top 10 quarterback going back to 2021 as well. That 62.9 QBR would have slotted him 8th overall. The problem is, when I'm in those years and I go and I look for the QBR for Daniel Jones, I don't see him in 2021 on the list. That's the problem. When I go back to 2023, this regular season, and we understand he obviously was injured, but when you go and you look for him there, I don't see him on the list because he was injured and he didn't qualify for that, right? So the problem is that, like, the one-off sample size does not suggest it. What we know about Daniel Jones, it's more likely that he's not the guy. And we're not breaking news here. It's more likely that he's not the guy than he is the guy. And it's more likely that 2022 was the blip, not the trend. And that's ultimately what it comes down to here. And I think everything, when we talk about the influence that people have putting him 32nd, it's because he was a 55.7 in his rookie year, a 54 in 2020, a 47.5 in 2021, big splash in 2022, and then he was a 36.3 over 6 games in 2023. That's the problem here. And that's where, if you want to be justified in ranking him dead last, that's it. It's that everything about him suggests he is far more a bottom tier quarterback than he ever is going to be that version of 2022.
I have one more question for you. Just thinking
Sure.
about, like, when the chips are on the table.
Oh, yes.
If you had a
Poker.
playoff
That's a
game.
poker reference.
Yeah, well, yes, it
Got
could be, or it could be just a fun snacking day where all the
you could be
chips are
having
on
like
the table and
sandwiches
you're
and everyone puts
snacking.
some
You
chips
know what I
down.
mean?
Yeah. And I'm hungry and I want chips. Yeah.
If you had a playoff game, and this is thinking that everyone is fully healthy, and you could have Derek Carr as your quarterback or Daniel Jones as your quarterback, who are you taking?
Well, that's interesting. Neither? Can I take neither? Because like, I don't know, like, I know you're gonna say like, oh, you would take Daniel Jones, right? Because like he's won the playoff game and you have that sample of him. I don't know. Because here's the okay. Listen, we're blowing past it at the end of the day here. But isn't the problem, like you mentioned Derek Carr? Okay, just checking in. I know he had Devontae Adams. We all understand that. But when were the Raiders a really good team? Like in totality, when did we go into a season where we're like, watch out for the Raiders this year? That was never the case. Now, that's partially because Derek Carr is the quarterback, but also because their offensive line was always a mess and like their team was so dysfunctional and they never had a good head coach. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? Like, and you can say for Daniel Jones or any quarterback, hey, good and bad and indifferent, but he went in and he won a playoff game for sure. This isn't like championing Derek Carr. But I think it's like always like context matters, right? It's what people would, if you are and they're still out there, if you're a staunch Daniel Jones defender, it's because you go, the offensive line has been total trash. They never had any weapons, never had a number one, all those things, right? And then you push back. Well, they had Saquon Barkley. Well, they had, whatever it is. So like, you're always going to caveat these things. I tell you what, if all the chips are down, potato or otherwise, and I have to go into a playoff game with either Derek Carr or Daniel Jones, I'm not feeling great about my chances of having another chip that day. I'm thinking that I'm going to be going to the store to buy my own.
Yeah, I mean, trust me. I think we're talking about the bottom 10 because that's kind of where the area is that we think
we're comparing bottom 10 quarterbacks.
Yes, exactly. But
you got to watch this on YouTube, guys. I said that, and Andy just gave the old shoulder shrug because that's the state of the Giants currently right now, right? And a better conversation would be, should you be ranking Drew Lock ahead of Daniel Jones, right? Like that's the one everybody wants to have. Everybody wants to say, go look at how he performed. What do we think about him? He was in a playoff game. He did some things for this team. The bottom line is, go ahead.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say is, I see JJ McCarthy on there because he got drafted to the Vikings. People are still saying Sam Darnold's going to start. And if Sam Darnold was the one that was on this list, they would probably have him in the same spot as JJ McCarthy. And it's funny what happens. Like, you go sit on the bench. You go sit on the bench for like 2 years. You don't throw a pass after being horrible in your regular season game action. And now all of a sudden you're getting a multi-year contract and you're getting listed above guys that win playoff games. Like, it is crazy. Like, to your point, Daniel Jones, let's just say this year doesn't work out for him and he ends up moving on from the Giants and becomes a backup somewhere else for a year or two. It's going to be the same thing. People are going to squint and then turn around and say, well, like, he's had a little bit of seasoning. He's understood what needs to go. Like, he needs another crack, a la Gardner Minshew, a la Jacoby Brissett, a la Sam Darnold. It happens so frequently, and it's just the ebb and flow and the arc of, like, Daniel Jones isn't a good starting quarterback. He's like the best backup QB ever. Maybe we should give him a shot again. Like, that's just the arc of being a fringe back end bottom 10 starting quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, if Sam Darnold had been on this list, that probably would have been the most insulting thing. That would have been the most insulting thing you could have done. Because if you look at this list, he should be ahead of Brissett.
Passes. He's been bounced around, traded multiple times, released, spent his time as a backup QB, and then teams are like, if we squint hard enough, Sam Darnold could be our starting quarterback. It's like we've officially jumped the shark here.
Yeah, you know what? See, have some guts, CBS. Put Sam Darnold on your power rankings list and then come talk to me. Well, anyway, like I say, guys, I want you to know you can get us on YouTube. And believe me, not only do we do 3 shows a week and we're talking about everything important to the Giants, but we're also a lot more organized than we normally are on this episode today. I don't know what happened, Andrew. I mean, it was a good talk. I had a great time. I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. I feel like I blacked out and I don't know what happened. Bottom line is, though, YouTube One Giant Podcast, AMAC 214 at Adam Marber. Get in the comments, by the way. Like, I really, change up the rankings for us. We'll revisit this across the course of the summer. Where would you have them? What quarterbacks would you take? Would you automatically want any rookie, no matter who it is on that list, over Daniel Jones this year? Get into the comments in that regard, because I do want to get a sense of that. And we will do again at some point. We ranked our QBs based on not only performance, but also price over the years. That's been a really fun exercise as well. So you get us on all these great platforms. Enjoy it. Enjoy the weekend. Get some fun. Get some sun in there. And until next time, I don't know what's happening. Until the best times, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need and demand that people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.